Good morning, Central family. It's good to be with you on this Tuesday morning. I am wearing my winter hat because I have coronavirus hair. Haven't had a haircut in 2 months, a reality of our times. So I didn't want to inflict that on you. I was not with you in worship on Sunday. I was at Old First in Brooklyn because one of the strange things about this time is that you can preach all over the country without even leaving your house, and you can worship all over the country without leaving your house. One of the passages that I preached on was Psalm 23, and it is such a familiar psalm. But I wanted to share a couple thoughts, a couple details, a couple reflections in the hopes that this old and ancient poem might have some new meaning for you on this day. So let me read you a slightly different version than what is in your Bibles. This is the Hebrew scholar Robert Alter's translation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In grass meadows he makes me lie down. By quiet waters he guides me. My life he brings back. He leads me on pathways of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk in the vale of death's shadow, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, it is they that console me. You set out a table before me in the face of my foes. You moisten my head with oil. My cup overflows. Let but goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long days. So, a couple of details that I think are worth paying attention to that I had never noticed before I returned to this psalm to prepare to preach. The first thing is, in that line that most of us know as though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, Robert Alter translates it, I fear no harm, for you, God, are with me. It's not that I fear no evil, it's I fear no harm. And this isn't a pledge that no harm will come or that no trouble will inflict your life. It's a promise that God will be with you even through it all. We know that bad things will happen. Bad things are happening now. Our congregation, our families, our world are walking through an extremely difficult season. I don't know if it's something we can ascribe to evil. I don't know if we can blame any particular leader or country or system. We know that some of the injustices of the world are exacerbated because of the suffering that's going on right now. We know that some members of our society bear an unfair share of the suffering because our systems are inequitable. And yet there is this divine promise. Amidst harm, God will still be there. Amidst harm, God's presence never departs. So that's one thing I want to remind you of this morning. The other thing, because in a season like this, God can feel so distant. There are definitely days where I struggle to remember that promise of God's presence. It feels as if God has a gazillion and one things to do, and why would God need to bother with me? Psalm 23 is a collective prayer. It is written for worship. It's written for the congregation. And it also functions on a deeply intimate level. And I wanted to point out that there's a shift. There's a shift in the way that the psalmist talks about God. God leads me on pathways of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk in the vale of death's shadow, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Do you hear that change? In the first few verses, the psalmist refers to God in the third person. He makes me lie down. He guides me. He brings me back. He leads me for his name's sake. And then, as the psalmist walks through the valley of the shadow of death, suddenly it's as if he realizes that God is not, in fact, this distant, impersonal figure, that God is right there. I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, it is they that console me. You set out a table. Suddenly, we're invited into that deeper, more personal, more direct knowledge of God, where we can dare to approach God with our worries. We can dare to approach God with our sorrows. We can dare to approach God with our joys. And all of that is welcome. Think on that God. Meditate on that God. Talk to that God today. Because God promises that you need not fear harm. And God promises to be with you. Blessings on your day, Central. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon.